Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Jordan Christie.
And I'm Barry Graham.
We highlight the week's news and stories happening all over Hampton Roads. We've got the latest ahead in this week's program. President Trump visited Turkey this week as part of the NATO summit. NATO officials are balancing the president's desires while ensuring U.S. support. Trump reinforced his desire for the United States to take control of Greenland.
While we have challenges of sorting where we've been in the past to what we need to be capable of doing in the future, we are stronger than we've been in years.
Virginia state budget earmarked $1 million for a museum over in Portsmouth that honors the historical contributions of Black women.
And Hampton Roads community leaders are searching for ways to combat summertime gun violence. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Kempsville High's first transgender salutatorian said her graduation speech was a moment to share trans joy. WHRO's Ashley White reports.
Evelyn Gallagher reflected on high school being a place for students to find community and their voices. It was also a time for Gallagher to shape her identity as a trans teen. When she shared in her speech that she was the school's first trans salutatorian, the crowd erupted into applause. It was a validating moment that affirmed her story as one worth telling.
When I said that, the entire room lit up. I mean, it wasn't even just clapping, it was cheering. And that was so amazing.
Gallagher will study astrophysics and music performance in the fall. Ashley White, WHRO News.
A note of transparency, Virginia Beach City Public Schools is a member of HRETA, which holds WHRO's license.
State lawmakers have budgeted nearly $15 million to help Virginia Medicaid cover sickle cell gene therapy. WHRO's Yi-Ching Wang breaks down how the money will help patients.
Sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disorder that can cause intense pain and organ damage. Madiha Deo with the Centera EVMS Comprehensive Sickle Cell Program says the region has up to 1,200 adults living with the disease. Many lacked specialty care before the program launched in 2024.
They were either seeking care with their primary care doctors or hematologists, that may not see a lot of sickle cell patients. And when they weren't receiving care at a sickle cell center, they were having to rely on local emergency rooms and hospitals for their acute care.
The program now serves more than 200 patients. It refers eligible ones who are interested in gene therapy, a complex process that involves chemotherapy that could affect fertility, to VCU Health enrichment. The funding aims to help patients access treatment and fertility preservation. Yi-Ching Wang, WHRO News.
The Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia is suing the city of Virginia Beach for fair housing violations. WHRO's Toby Cox dives into the lawsuit. And a note for listeners, this story mentions thoughts of suicide, so please listen with care.
The city took away Rashida Scott's housing choice voucher, saying she inflated the size of her household to get a bigger apartment. Scott says that was a caseworker's administrative error. Now she's facing homelessness, and the stress has taken its toll.
I felt like I didn't want to go on with my life anymore because I wasn't able to afford anything if I didn't have the voucher.
The city ignored requests for reasonable accommodations for Scott, who has conditions that can make complex paperwork difficult. Melissa Bonfiglio at Legal Aid says that violates fair housing laws.
If you are struggling to complete paperwork as a direct result of your disability, that's sort of the definition of discrimination right there.
Scott says she hopes the city reinstates her voucher. Toby Cox, WHRO News.
President Trump attended a NATO summit in Turkey this week. He reiterated his goal for the U.S. to take control of Greenland.
For NATO officials, this was yet another reminder of the tricky balancing act they face as they work to ensure U.S. support for the alliance.
But in the meantime, NATO members are also eager to emphasize business continues, as WHRO's Steve Walsh reports for NPR.
About a week ago, the French naval vessel Dixmude was sailing off the North Carolina coast near Camp Lejeune. The Navy called it the largest exercise ever held in the Western Atlantic.
We deploy, as we see, with the Spanish, French, and American amphibious ships for exercise, okay?
Thomas is a French officer. French military policy is to only release first names. He says NATO partners are working closely together as they conduct beach landings and simulate handling mass casualties. But asked about the relationship between President Donald Trump and France's Emmanuel Macron, Thomas is more circumspect.
In France, military don't say politics. So I don't have an opinion on that one. Okay, sorry for that one. I think I think military is the same for USA, so we don't talk politics.
The Dixmude is carrying 160 officers in training from 16 different countries, including from the U.S. Navy. They spent 2 weeks off the coast of Norfolk. U.S. Admiral Doug Perry ran the exercise as head of NATO's Joint Forces Command Norfolk. He, too, was just as diplomatic.
While we have challenges of sorting where we've been in the past to what we need to be capable of doing in the future, we are stronger than we've been in years. I don't get involved in politics.
But NATO is trying to adapt to the political climate created by the Trump administration. Soon after Perry leaves in September, a British commander will take over as head of the NATO command in Norfolk, which covers the Atlantic and the high north, including Greenland. It's a literal example of the Europeans taking a more direct role in the alliance. News of the change in command came during the 2025 NATO summit, after President Trump declared that the U.S. may take Greenland by force. Matthew Koenig is vice president at the Atlantic Council.
That was really unprecedented, the idea that a NATO ally would attack another NATO ally, and really not just any NATO ally, but the United States, the leader of the alliance. And so that really, I think it's hard to underestimate how much that shook European leaders.
The U.S. is reviewing the amount of forces available to Europe. As members prepare to meet in Turkey this week, there is hope among NATO leaders that the rhetoric is designed to push Europe to spend more rather than force a break in the alliance, Koenig says. Ian Brzezinski, a resident fellow at the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, is not so sure. He fears the Trump administration may have other reasons to push allies to spend 5% of GDP on defense.
Basically using burden sharing as a camouflage to hide the real intent, which is to have an absolutely minimal posture in Europe.
Back in Norfolk for the last day of the Navy training exercise, Captain Wolfgang Eckmüller, commander of the German frigate FGS Saxon, says the alliance is stepping up.
Absolutely. I think it's already happening. If you look at Germany, we boosted our defense budget by 5 times. And that's quite a huge thing in Germany. We're building so many frigates right now, and that's really impressive.
Whether it's enough will be one of the questions answered in Turkey this week. For NPR News, I'm Steve Walsh in Norfolk, Virginia.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, visitors flocked to see an endangered flower bloom at the Norfolk Botanical Garden this week. But first, some Hampton Roads cities are ditching curbside recycling in favor of a program that combines all junk into one bin. WHO's Catherine Hafner reports the region's longtime recycling company is concerned.
TFC Recycling has operated a sorting plant in Chesapeake for more than 50 years. President and owner Michael Benedetto says they worked with local governments to establish the 2-bin collection system.
Recycling works best when you pre-sort material at the household where it's kept clean and dry and separate from other trash.
The company has faced challenges in recent years, such as a China policy change that upended the industry. TFC has recovered. Now, Benedetto says he's concerned about a program from the Regional Waste Authority using AI to take recyclables straight from trash. He worries about contaminating valuable commodities.
We do believe that there is a place for that, but it's secondary and should be complementing a 2-cart system.
Suffolk, Chesapeake, and Portsmouth have recently shifted to the 1-bin system. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Virginia is setting aside $150 million for a new health insurance affordability fund that could save some Virginians as much as 70% on monthly premiums. WHO's Yi-Ching Wang is back with a breakdown of the numbers.
Kevin Patchett with the Virginia Health Benefit Exchange, which operates the state's public insurance marketplace, says an estimated 200,000 Virginians could qualify. The program applies to individuals making roughly $22,000 to $40,000 a year.
Part of the purpose of this program is to bring back Virginians who dropped coverage because they couldn't afford it, and hopefully even encouraging some additional uninsured Virginians to take advantage of the benefits of health insurance.
Patchett says marketplace enrollment has dropped about 20% this year after carrier rates increased and enhanced federal tax credits expired. Open enrollment begins November 1st. Yi-Ching Wang, WHRO News.
Virginia Beach may buy a small parcel of land to add to its Rudy Park project at the oceanfront. WHRO's John Doucette covers the latest.
On Tuesday, City Council could vote to buy 1/10 of an acre near the Rudy Loop project. The land now has an apartment building, and if the sale is approved, the land would be incorporated into the planned park. The sale price is $3 million, and the city would use money from its open space fund. The city already owns about 8 acres for the park. Estimates for the overall park project had been $42.6 million. City officials have said they want to raise millions more through private donations. Vice Mayor Rosemary Wilson told WHRO the property could be used for more public parking. John Doucette, WHRO News.
Virginia state budget earmarks $1 million for a Portsmouth museum that celebrates the contributions of Black women. WHRO's Toby Cox says it will highlight several inventors and innovators.
The Museum of Black Women Innovators in Portsmouth will feature 250 Black women whose ideas led to inventions and movements that changed history.
They were trailblazers.
That's Angela Reddix, the founder of the museum. She says the $1 million from the state will help with the final rollout of exhibits and construction. It will also go towards programming so students can get in for free.
The state support is really helping to not only fund a building, it's creating educational opportunities for students. It's going to attract tourism. It's going to strengthen Virginia's creative economy.
She says the museum is on track to open in November. Toby Cox, WHRO News.
The City of Newport News released an economic impact study and report of what was spent on the 2026 Noodle Convention. Nash Phillips reports for WHRO.
Noodle, the Thinkers Convention, was a free 2-day event in downtown Newport News featuring culture, business, panel discussions, and live performances from stars like Chance the Rapper. The city gave convention organizers a $3 million grant. Over the 2 days, approximately 4,000 people attended, generating just over $1 million in economic impact. According to Vice Mayor Curtis Bethany, the event was held to explore whether Newport News can host major events to bring attention to the city. More than 2/3 of attendees rated their experience highly, and roughly 85% said they would be inclined to return to the event again. In the release, the funding is described as a one-time investment. As it stands, it's unclear whether Noodle will return. Nash Phillips, WHRO News.
Tangier Island is one of the last inhabited islands in the Chesapeake Bay. It's become a time capsule of what life with the water used to look like.
But sea level rise and erosion threaten the community's future. Decision makers recently converged on the island to talk about efforts to save it.
Lauren Hines Acosta with the Chesapeake Bay Journal joined them.
Captain Terry Parks helps us into a boat at a pier in Crisfield, Maryland. Everyone's excited to visit the island. And we're off to the center of the bay, right below the Virginia state line. Tangier is a special place for both humans and animals. It provides marsh habitat for nesting birds and underwater grasses for crabs. And most people there are descendants of the British colonists who settled the island. Now, most rely heavily on the water for their livelihood. But that same water is threatening the island. Tangier has shrunk by 2/3 since 1850. Researchers say the town could be uninhabitable as early as 2053. But Mayor James Eskridge, better known as Ooker, told me on the boat that Tangier's way of life is worth saving.
Some folks will say, maybe you should just give up and move to the mainland, but it's home, and we want to preserve it.
Tangier has become an example of how the country will help people adapt to climate change. The federal government has already stepped in. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers installed a seawall to protect the island's airport in 1990. A jetty was installed just north of that 30 years later to protect crab and oyster boats. But Tangier needs a lot more help. The Chesapeake Bay Foundation is an environmental nonprofit and has been bringing scientists and local leaders together to figure out how to save the island. They met on Tangier this June to share their progress.
All right, yeah, we'll see you here shortly.
We arrive on the island. The dock is lined with crab shacks, and some are already succumbing to the bay. Vespas and golf carts rumble by a restaurant. Everyone will enjoy some crab cakes there during the meeting.
Did anybody get a crab cake? That's not good.
I'll take it. The Bay Foundation and the engineering firm Bayland have been drafting a shoreline resiliency plan. This plan will allow advocates to apply for larger federal grants. So far, they've modeled future flooding scenarios and mapped out the most vulnerable parts of the island. Proposed solutions include restoring marshes and elevating homes in some areas. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation gave about $350,000 to start the plan, but the town did not receive the next set of funds to finish the final design and permitting phases. The next round of applications won't open until February, which delays the project. In the meantime, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Virginia Institute of Marine Science are building oyster reefs along Tangier to slow shoreline erosion. These projects could take a decade to install, but the town has maybe 3 decades left. Bayland coastal engineer Evan Mazer is optimistic that the plan will positively impact the island long term.
Islands are disappearing in the bay, and so supporting this archipelago, while it's still viable to be supported in this way, I think we have to seize that opportunity now.
No one chats as the boat hums its way back to the mainland. The island shrinks on the horizon, and eventually it disappears into the bay. For the Chesapeake Bay Journal, I'm Lauren Hines Acosta.
Every summer in Hampton Roads, temperatures rise, and so does anxiety about gun violence. Community leaders are searching for ways to combat the problem. Sandra Jones reports for WHRO News.
Monica Atkins is fighting to save the next child. She lost her son Antonio to gun violence in 2014. Today, as executive director of Stop the Violence 757 in Portsmouth, she believes de-escalation training can help.
It teaches youth how to walk away. Everything don't require a response,
4 Hampton Roads cities, Norfolk, Portsmouth, Newport News, and Hampton, account for more than a quarter of all gun homicides in Virginia. Norfolk Commonwealth's attorney, Ramin Fadahi, says the real problem is access to guns.
The lack of safe storage of guns and the easy availability of guns on the black market due to theft is a huge problem.
The debate continues as another summer begins in Hampton Roads. Sandra Jones, WHRO News.
A rare corpse flower has bloomed at the Norfolk Botanical Garden, and it only lasts a few days. Throngs of people flocked to see the flower over the weekend. WHRO's Catherine Hefner was among them.
Corpse flowers get their name from the intense stench that happens when they bloom. Michelle Bedanza with the Botanical Garden says the plant mimics the scent of decaying flesh to attract pollinators like beetles. In other words,
if you were to climb inside a big metal dumpster in the middle of summer, that is exactly what it smells like.
The Norfolk flower is dubbed Lady Macbeth. Fewer than 1,000 corpse flowers are left in the wild. Bedanza says their tropical habitats have been razed for palm oil plantations.
As incredible as she is, at the end of the day, the reason why she is endangered and rare is because of deforestation. I think it is a moment to reflect on that and to think about daily choices that we're making.
She says people can reduce their use of products that contain palm oil. As for Lady Macbeth, it could take another decade before the next bloom. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
The National Civic League named Norfolk one of 10 All-American cities for 2026. WHRO's Brian Saunders brings us this breakdown.
The Civic Award recognizes Norfolk's shift toward resident-led programs. In its presentation to the National Civic League, the city highlighted data from its People First initiative, which is helping those moving out of the St. Paul's area. 89% of families participating in the program are now stably housed. The city also touted its Community First violence intervention strategy and the Neighbor Care mobile resource hubs that aim to increase access to social services. Brian Saunders, WHRO News.
Among the recent accomplishments of Richmond's Nate Smith, in addition to netting a pair of Grammys, is becoming the Newport Jazz Festival's artistic director. Since 1954, the events served as an annual overview of the contemporary jazz scene. VPM's Dave Cantor has more.
The drummer's in rarefied company. Only Newport Jazz Festival founder George Ween and bassist Christian McBride have booked the show's lineup. This July, Nate Smith's overseeing a sprawling bill that includes sets by Richmond's Butcher Brown, as well as another performance by the group's drummer, Corey Fonville.
So there's a responsibility, I feel, to maintain what I think was the main legacy of George Ween, which was, number one, to platform these artists who are playing incredible music, but also to present the full spectrum of jazz. His first Newport, he presented it as jazz from J to Z. In his mind, it's like it's not just swing, it's not just bebop, it's not just this, it's all of it, for me, I feel like I occupy the intersection of all of it, in an interesting way at this moment. So, yeah, it's a little daunting. It's a little bit daunting when I think about that.
Smith's own history at Newport includes multiple appearances that stretch back to 2004, when he first played there with bassist Dave Holland, a band leader the Chesapeake-born drummer connected with while attending grad school at Virginia Commonwealth University. Calls to pick up gigs with the bassist began in 1999 and 2000, with Smith eventually joining Holland's group full-time in New York the following fall. It was about a week before the September 11th attacks, which, in addition to shifting world history, shut down performances in the city.
It was a freak-out moment, but I kind of had some faith that things would work out,
After a sense of normalcy returned, Smith accompanied Holland on a 3-month European tour and started working in the Chris Potter Underground, alongside the notable band leader and saxophonist. During the next decade, Smith performed and recorded with a litany of players, though by the early 2010s, the drummer said, he'd hit a rough patch. There were still gigs to play, just less of them. But he'd reached a place in his musical development where he was prepared to tell his own story through composition. What resulted was a pair of kinfolk albums, insinuating a world of influence tied as much to his father's 1970s listening habits as to his own jazz education and a decade's worth of playing in New York.
That's the music that was my gateway to everything else. So the first sounds I heard in the house was that era. This instrumental R&B with jazz language, some jazz language. There's like a beautiful moment where this hybrid thing existed before it was commodified as smooth jazz. It was just what cats were doing. It was just Grover Washington and Joe Sample and Quincy Jones and Herbie. And, Herbie's thing was a lot more jazz and, avant even leaning. But it was still there. It still had a groove and it still had these R&B elements.
Since that first kinfolk record in 2017, Smith appeared on dozens of recordings that spanned rock, soul, funk, and jazz, and realized during the pandemic that he didn't need to be in New York. So after a brief stop in Nashville, he moved back to Richmond in 2023, in part, he said, to be closer to family. Fathers, the drummer's latest project, issued its self-titled debut on Blue Note this summer. The trio, which also counts keyboardist Kiefer and bassist Cartoons, relies on Smith's combo of American music and sets the compositions alongside a cast of vocal collaborators.
I'm happy it kind of does, to me, and this goes back to my roots, it still occupies this intersection of R&B and jazz, and there's something there, and there's a language there, and so it's a producer record, it's an instrumental record, but I also think that there's something really personal about it that people can connect with.
After festival season dies down, the drummer said he's bringing the trio to Richmond, another chance to reintroduce himself to the city. I'm Dave Cantor.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Toby Cox, John Doucette, Catherine Hafner, Sandra Jones, Nash Phillips, Brian Saunders, Steve Walsh, Yi-Ching Wang, and Ashley White.
The Chesapeake Bay Journal's Lauren Hines Acosta and VPM's Dave Cantor. Also, Connor Worley, who produced today's show.
A reminder that you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed.
You can get your news updates at WHRO.org and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Barry Graham.
And I'm Jordan Christie. Have a great weekend.